Are you lost too? Or just pretending you're not? The question lands softly, almost swallowed by the quiet hum of a marble-floored hotel lobby. But somehow it cuts deeper than anything Adrian Wolfe has heard all night. He pauses mid-step, one hand still wrapped around his phone, the glow of unread messages reflecting faintly against his cufflink, the kind engraved, custom-made, unnecessary. Everything about him is unnecessary, he thinks, except control. He turns. The girl isn't supposed to be here. That's the first thought. Not in a place like this, where the air smells like polished wood and expensive cologne, where even silence feels curated. She sits curled slightly into herself on a velvet chair near the far column, a worn canvas bag resting at her feet, her coat too thin for the chill still clinging to the city outside. She looks up at him like she didn't just break an invisible rule, like she belongs anywhere she decides to sit. Adrian studies her for a second longer than he should. He's good at reading people. Investors, rivals, board members, they all reveal themselves in patterns, in hesitation, in posture. But her, she doesn't fit a pattern. There's no performance in her eyes. No calculation. Just something steady. Unafraid. I'm not lost, he says finally, his voice even, practiced, the same tone that has closed million-dollar deals and ended conversations before they could begin. She tilts her head slightly, almost amused. That's what people usually say when they are. A faint smile touches her lips, not mocking, not kind either. Just certain. Adrian exhales quietly, slipping his phone into his pocket. Somewhere upstairs, a boardroom full of people is waiting for him to sign a decision that will decide whether he keeps his company or loses it piece by piece. His name is on the building, but tonight, it feels like it belongs to someone else. And you? He asks, more out of curiosity than intention. Are you lost? She shrugs, pulling her coat tighter. I was. Not anymore. A beat passes. The chandelier above them hums faintly, light scattering across the polished floor like something fragile. Adrian should leave. He has somewhere to be. Somewhere important. But for the first time all evening, he doesn't move. You don't belong here, he says, not unkindly, just stating a fact the way he sees it. She nods once, as if she expected that. Neither do you. That stops him. Not because it's offensive. Because it's true in a way he can't immediately explain. Adrian Wolfe, billionaire, CEO, the man who built an empire before turning 40, standing in the center of it all, feeling like a visitor. The silence stretches, but it isn't uncomfortable. It feels like something waiting. He looks at her again, really looks this time. The scuffed shoes, the tired edges, the quiet strength underneath it all. And then, something shifts. A thought. Quick. Unusual. Dangerous. What's your name, he asks. She hesitates, just for a second. Claire. He nods slowly, as if confirming something only he understands. Then he says it, just like that, as if it's the most logical solution in the world. Marry me. Just on paper. Claire does not answer right away, and for a moment it almost feels like the world around them holds its breath, as if even the quiet hum of the lobby is waiting to see whether she will laugh, walk away, or call security. But she does none of those things. Instead, she studies him carefully, her eyes moving over his face like she is trying to decide if he is serious or just another man playing a game she does not understand. That is not funny, she says finally, her voice calm, but edged with disbelief. Adrian does not smile. He does not soften the words or take them back. He simply reaches into his jacket and pulls out a sleek black card, holding it between two fingers before offering it to her. I am not joking, he says, and there is something in his tone, now something heavier than confidence, something closer to urgency. Claire hesitates before taking the card, her fingers brushing his for the briefest second, warm against cold. She glances down and her expression shifts, not dramatically, not like in the movies, but enough, a flicker of recognition, of weight, of something real. Adrian Wolfe, the name, sits there clean and sharp against the matte surface beneath it, a title, a company, a number she cannot even begin to process. She looks back up at him slower this time. People do not just ask strangers to marry them, she says. People who are about to lose everything do. He replies, and that is the first honest thing he has said all night. The words hang between them, not loud, but undeniable. Claire exhales quietly, her grip tightening slightly on the card, as if grounding herself. So this is what a business deal. She asks. Adrian nods once. A contract marriage. I need stability in my public image. Immediately something that looks real, something that cannot be questioned. You need. He pauses, his gaze dropping briefly to the worn edges of her coat, to the bag at her feet, then back to her eyes. A way to not be here anymore. Claire lets out a small breath that almost turns into a laugh, but does not quite make it. You do not even know me, she says. I know enough, he answers. You are not afraid to speak to someone you think has nothing to offer you. That means you are not here for status, and you did not ask me for anything before I offered something. That means you are not desperate enough to lie. Claire looks away for a second toward the tall glass doors where the city lights blur into streaks of gold and white. She could walk out right now. Disappear back into the cold, into the uncertainty, into the quiet, constant fight to stay one step ahead of losing everything again. She knows how that story goes. She has been living it for months. And what happens when this contract ends? She asks softly. Adrian does not hesitate. You walk away with financial security, housing, and a clean start, no strings attached. He watches her carefully, now not like a businessman evaluating a deal, but like someone waiting for an answer that matters more than it. Should Claire turns the card over in her hand once, then again, the simple motion buying her time. And what do I have to give up? She asks. Adrian's jaw tightens just slightly before he answers. Nothing. You are not willing to sign your name to. A beat passes. No feelings, no expectations, no questions about my personal life. And when we are in public, you will stand beside me like you belong there. Claire meets his eyes again, and this time there is something different in hers, not uncertainty, not fear, but something sharper, something deciding. You are asking me to pretend, she says. Adrian nods. Yes. She tilts her head just slightly, her voice quiet but steady. Then do not expect me to. Forget that it is all fake. Adrian's expression does not change, but something in his eyes does, something almost like relief. I would not want you to, he says, and for the first time that night neither of them looks away. The contract is placed in front of her less than an hour later in a private conference room on the top floor, where the city stretches endlessly beyond the glass walls like something unreachable, and yet suddenly within her grasp. Claire sits at the edge of a leather chair that feels too expensive to belong to anyone who has ever counted every dollar before spending it, her fingers resting lightly on the thick paper, as if it might disappear if she presses too hard. Adrian stands across from her, jacket off, sleeves rolled just enough to suggest control rather than comfort, a pen set neatly beside the document, aligned with precision that speaks more about him than any introduction ever could. You should read it carefully, he says, his voice steady but quieter now, stripped of the performance he uses in boardrooms. Claire lets out a soft breath, her eyes scanning the first page, lines of legal language stretching across the paper in clean, unforgiving structure. She does not understand every word, but she understands enough. Duration 12 months, financial compensation listed in numbers that feel unreal, housing provided, full discretion required. She pauses when she reaches the clause that matters most, no emotional obligation, no expectation of permanence. She almost smiles at that, because for someone like her, permanence has never been an option anyway. You really thought this through, she murmurs. Adrian's gaze does not waver. I do not make decisions I have not already calculated. Claire glances up at him, and for the first time, there is something almost challenging in her expression. And you calculated me in less than 5 minutes. Adrian exhales slowly, as if the question is more complicated than he wants it to be. I calculated the situation, he says, but the answer feels incomplete, even to him. Claire looks back down at the contract, her thumb brushing lightly against the edge of the page, a small grounding motion she has not noticed she has been doing. If I sign this, she says quietly, I become part of your world, but not really part of it. Adrian nods once. Correct, she tilts her head slightly. And if I do not? Adrian does not hesitate. Then nothing changes for me, and everything stays the same for you. The honesty of that lands heavier than anything else he could have said. Claire leans back slightly in the chair, her eyes drifting again to the window, where the lights of the city flicker like distant possibilities. She has spent months surviving one day at a time, moving from place to place, never staying long enough to feel safe, never stable enough to plan anything beyond tomorrow. This is different. This is controlled, structured, almost unreal, but it is still a choice, and that alone feels unfamiliar. 1 year, she repeats softly. Adrian nods. 1 year. She looks down at the contract one last time, then at the pen, then back at him. And after that we walk away like none of it ever happened. Adrian's jaw tightens just slightly before he answers yes. Claire studies him for a long second, as if searching for something hidden beneath the surface, something that explains why a man like him would need something like this. And then slowly she reaches for the pen, her fingers steady now in a way they were not before. She signs her name, Claire Bennett, the ink dark against the page. Final immediate real. She sets the pen down gently and slides the contract back toward him. Adrian looks at the signature for a moment longer than necessary, as if it carries more weight than any agreement he has ever made. Then he picks up the second copy, signs his own name, Adrian Wolf, and closes the folder with a quiet, decisive motion. It is done, he says. Claire exhales softly, not relief, not fear, something in between, something new. Adrian steps closer, but not too close, maintaining the careful distance they have both agreed to without saying it aloud. From this moment on, you are my wife in every way that matters to the world, he says. Claire meets his gaze, her voice calm but firm, just not in the ways that matter to us. Adrian holds her eyes for a second and nods once. Exactly. And somewhere in the quiet space between those two truths, something unspoken begins to take shape. The first morning does not feel like a new life. It feels like stepping into someone else's reflection. Claire wakes up before the sun fully rises, not because she has to, but because her body has not yet learned how to trust comfort. The room around her is quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that does not belong to small apartments or shared spaces, but to places designed for people who never worry about noise. She sits up slowly, the soft sheets falling away from her shoulders as she takes in the space, floor to ceiling, windows, a skyline view stretching for miles, a closet larger than any room she has lived in for the past year. For a moment she just sits there, her hands resting on the edge of the bed, grounding herself, reminding herself this is real, or at least real enough. A quiet knock breaks the stillness. Miss Bennett, good morning, a voice calls gently from the other side of the door. Claire hesitates before answering. Come in. The door opens, and a woman in a tailored uniform steps inside, offering a polite professional smile. Mr. Wolf has arranged for your schedule today, styling at 9, etiquette briefing at 11, and a fitting this afternoon for tonight's event. Claire blinks once, processing the words too fast, too structured. Event, she repeats. Yes, ma'am, a charity gala you will be attending as Mrs. Wolf. The title lands differently than she expects, not heavy, not exciting, just unfamiliar, like a coat that does not quite fit, yet Claire nods slowly. Okay. The woman gives a small nod in return and exits as quietly as she entered, leaving Claire alone again with the weight of what she agreed to. A few minutes later, she stands in front of the mirror in the dressing room. The reflection staring back at her almost looks like someone she recognizes, but not entirely. Her hair has been styled softly, her makeup subtle but precise, her clothes replaced with something tailored, elegant, intentional. She lifts her hand, slightly brushing her fingers against the fabric of the dress, smooth, expensive, foreign. This is what belonging looks like, she thinks, or at least what it is supposed to look like. You are adjusting faster than I expected. Adrian's voice comes from behind her, calm, measured. She turns slightly, catching his reflection in the mirror before facing him directly. He stands a few feet away, already dressed in a dark suit, perfectly fitted, every detail in place like he has always existed in this world. I am pretending well enough, she says. Adrian studies her for a moment, not her appearance, but her expression. That is all that is required, he replies. Claire lets out a quiet breath, turning back to the mirror. And if I stop pretending? Adrian does not answer immediately. When he does, his voice is softer. Then they will notice. Claire meets his eyes again through the reflection. Not them, she says quietly. You. The words hang between them, unexpected. Unguarded. Adrian's expression does not change, but something shifts beneath it, something less controlled. This is an arrangement, Claire, he says. It works because we do not complicate it. Claire nods slowly, as if she understands, even if part of her does not. Right, no complications, she repeats, but her voice carries something else, something. He does not respond. To a moment later, he steps closer, but still keeps that careful distance. The car will be ready in 10 minutes, he says. Claire nods again. And when he turns to leave, she watches him for a second, longer than necessary. The way he moves, like everything is already decided, like there is no room for hesitation. And for the first time since she signed her name, she realizes something. This life may be temporary, but the way it is starting to feel is not. And that might be the most dangerous part of all. The car ride is silent, but not empty, the kind of silence that carries expectation rather than comfort. Claire sits beside Adrian in the back seat of a sleek black sedan, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Just as she was instructed, the city passing outside in streaks of light and movement, everything familiar, yet distant, like she is watching a life she used to belong to from behind glass. She catches her reflection faintly in the tinted window, the dress, the posture, the calm expression. It all looks convincing, almost enough to fool even herself. "You will stay on my left side at all times," Adrian says without looking at her, his voice steady, controlled. "If anyone asks about us, we met through mutual connections. Keep it simple, do not elaborate unless necessary." Claire nods once. "And if they ask something unexpected," Adrian finally turns his head slightly, his gaze meeting hers, "then you look at me and I will answer for you." She studies him for a second, then gives a small nod again. "Right." The car slows as they approach the venue, a grand building glowing under warm lights, cameras already flashing near the entrance, people dressed in polished perfection, stepping out of luxury vehicles like it is second nature. Claire feels something shift in her chest, not fear exactly, but awareness. This is where she is expected to belong. Now the driver opens the door, and Adrian steps out first, then turns, extending his hand toward her, not casually, not personally, but deliberately, part of the image. Claire looks at his hand for a brief second before placing hers in his. The contact is brief, but grounding as she steps out onto the pavement, the night air cool against her skin, the sound of voices and cameras rising instantly. "Stay close," Adrian murmurs quietly, "just for her." She nods and moves beside him, their pace steady, synchronized. As they walk forward, flashes of light, capturing every step, every angle, every detail. "Adrian, over here," someone calls out. "Is this the woman we have been hearing about?" Another voice follows. Claire feels the attention like heat, but she does not flinch. She remembers what she practiced, shoulders back, chin level, eyes calm. She belongs here, even if she does not believe it. Yet Adrian's hand shifts slightly at her back, not touching, just guiding. And when he finally stops, he turns slightly toward her, just enough for the cameras to catch the moment. "This is my wife, Claire," he says simply, no hesitation, no embellishment. The word lands heavier this time. Wife, not part of a contract, not written on paper, but spoken out loud in front of a world that will believe it. Claire feels something in her chest tighten unexpectedly, but she smiles, soft, controlled, exactly as she was taught. "It is nice to meet you," she says, her voice steady as reporters begin asking questions, their voices overlapping. "How long have you been married? Why keep it private until now?" Adrian answers, smoothly, deflecting, redirecting, controlling the narrative like he always does. And Claire watches him for a moment, realizing this is his world, not because of the wealth or the power, but because he knows how to move through it without hesitation, without doubt. But then something unexpected happens. A woman steps forward, her expression sharp, her smile too polished to be genuine. "Adrian, you never mentioned her before," she says, her tone light, but edged with something else. "I suppose some surprises are harder to explain." Claire turns her head slightly, looking at the woman, then back at Adrian, waiting just as instructed for him to handle it. But for a brief second their eyes meet, and something unspoken passes between them, something that was not part of the agreement. And for the first time that night, Claire does not feel like she is pretending. She feels like she is stepping into something real, and she is not sure if that is a mistake or the beginning of something neither of them planned. Adrian does not answer the woman immediately, and that silence alone shifts the energy around them just enough for people to notice, because a man like him never hesitates unless something matters, and Claire feels it, the subtle tightening in the space, the way attention sharpens, like everyone is waiting to see how this plays out. The woman steps closer, her heels clicking softly against the polished floor, her gaze moving over Claire with a kind of polite scrutiny that feels anything but polite. "You must be new to all of this," she says, her smile still perfectly in place. Claire could step back, could let Adrian take control like he said he would, but something in her resists that instinct, something steady and quiet that has nothing to do with the contract. She straightens slightly, her voice calm but clear. "Everyone is new at something at some point," she replies, and the words land softer than a challenge, but stronger than expected. Adrian turns his head just slightly enough to look at her, not surprised exactly, but aware. The woman's smile flickers for a fraction of a second before returning sharper. "Now, of course," she says lightly. "I just hope you know what you are stepping into." Claire meets her gaze without looking away. "I do," she says, and for the first time that night, she almost believes it. Adrian shifts, then just enough to re-enter the conversation, his voice smooth, controlled, reclaiming the space. "That will be all for tonight, Vanessa," he says, and the name changes everything, the familiarity, the history, the implication. Vanessa gives a small nod, her expression unreadable now before. Stepping back into the crowd as if she was never there at all, but the tension she leaves behind lingers just beneath the surface. Adrian turns slightly toward Claire, lowering his voice just enough that only she can hear. You were not required to respond. Claire glances at him, her expression composed, but her tone honest. I know. A pause passes between them, not uncomfortable, but not neutral either. And yet you did. He says quietly. Claire looks ahead at the room, filled with people who all seem to know exactly who they are and where they belong. You said I have to look like I belong here, she replies. That includes speaking when it matters. Adrian studies her for a moment longer than he intends, something in her words settling somewhere deeper than he expected. You handled it well, he says finally, and the words are simple, but they carry weight. Claire exhales softly, almost a quiet release of something she did not realize she was holding on to. I was not trying to impress anyone, she says. Adrian's gaze lingers on her for a second longer. That is exactly why it worked. The music in the room shifts as the event begins to move forward, conversations blending into a steady rhythm of voices and movement. Adrian offers his arm this time, not just as part of the image, but with a subtle intention. Claire hesitates for only a second before taking it, her hand resting lightly against his sleeve as they walk further into the room together, and something about the way people look at them changes. Not curiosity, not speculation, but acceptance, as if they have already decided this is real, this is expected, this is how it should be. And for a moment Claire forgets about the contract, forgets about the rules, forgets about the line they are not supposed to cross, because the way Adrian's presence steadies her, the way his voice lowers when he speaks just to her, the way he notices when she hesitates before she even realizes it herself, none of that feels like something written on paper, and Adrian feels it too, though he does not say it. The way her hand rests against his arm, without tension, the way she moves beside him, without needing direction, the way she looks at the world around her like she is learning it instead of fearing it. It shifts something in him, something he has kept controlled for years. And as they stop near the center of the room, surrounded by people and light and expectation, Adrian realizes something he did not account for when he created the contract. Some things cannot be calculated, and standing beside Claire, he is no longer entirely certain which part of this is still pretend. The applause begins softly at first, then builds as Adrian steps onto the stage, the room shifting its focus toward him like it always does. Power, recognition, expectation, all drawn to the same point. Claire stands just off to the side, where she was guided to remain visible, but not central, and for a moment she watches him, not as his wife, not as part of the image, but simply as a man standing alone under the lights. Thank you all for being here tonight. Adrian's voice carries effortlessly across the room, steady, confident, the same voice that built everything he owns. But now Claire hears something else beneath it. Something quieter, something almost tired. He speaks about growth, about responsibility, about vision. The words are polished, practiced, but when he glances toward her, just briefly, there is a flicker of something unguarded, something real. And then it is gone, replaced by control. Once again, Claire exhales slowly, her hands clasped lightly in front of her, reminding herself where she is, what this is supposed to be. But then she hears it, a voice behind her, low, just loud enough to reach its target. Interesting choice. Claire turns slightly, recognizing Vanessa before she fully faces her, the woman's expression composed, but her eyes sharper now. He always did prefer something unexpected. Vanessa continues, her gaze flicking briefly toward the stage. Though this is a risk even for him. Claire holds her posture steady. I do not think I am the risk you are referring to, she says. Vanessa's lips curve slightly, not quite a smile. No, I suppose not. You are just the consequence. The words land differently, not cruel, not loud, but precise. And for a moment Claire feels something shift inside her, not doubt exactly, but awareness, the kind that reminds her this world has layers she has not yet seen. Do you know what happens when people start asking questions? Vanessa continues, her tone almost conversational. They do not stop until they find something worth exposing. Claire meets her gaze calmly. Then I suppose there has to be something to find. Vanessa studies her for a second longer, then lets out a soft breath, almost amused. That is what makes this interesting, she says before stepping back, disappearing into the crowd just as smoothly as before, leaving Claire alone with the echo of her words and the growing sense that this is no longer just about pretending. The applause rises again as Adrian finishes his speech. and steps down, the attention shifting back into movement conversation energy. But something has changed. Claire can feel it, the subtle shift in how people look at her now, not just curiosity, but calculation, as if they are trying to place her, understand her, decide if she belongs. And for the first time that night, she feels it, the weight of expectation pressing in from all sides. Adrian returns to her, his expression controlled, but his eyes searching her face for something. "Are you all right?" he asks. Quietly, Claire nods once. "I am fine," she says, and she means it, at least partly. Adrian studies her for a moment longer. "Vanessa spoke to you." He says it is not a question. Claire does not deny it. She seems concerned. Adrian's jaw tightens slightly. She is invested in outcomes that no longer concern her. Claire tilts her head just slightly. "But they concern you." Adrian does not answer immediately, and that silence says more than anything else. Claire looks past him, at the room, at the people, at the life she stepped into, and something inside her settles, not fear, not hesitation, but something stronger, something more certain. Then maybe it is time. They do not control the outcome either, she says. Adrian looks at her, and for a moment the noise of the room fades, because the way she says it, the quiet certainty, the absence of doubt, it shifts something in him again, something he has been trying to keep contained, and standing there beside her in the middle of a world built on control and perception. Adrian realizes the one variable he cannot predict is the one standing right next to him, and he is no longer sure if that is the risk or the reason. He does not want this to end. The room feels different now, not louder, not quieter, but sharper, like every glance carries intention, and every conversation has an edge. Claire notices it in the way people pause half a second longer when she passes, in the way their smiles do not quite reach their eyes, in the way whispers seem to follow just out of reach. And for the first time since she stepped into this world, she understands something clearly. This is not about fitting in, this is about surviving perception. Adrian walks beside her, steady as always, his presence a constant anchor in a space designed to test anyone who does not belong. But tonight something about him is different, not in how he moves or speaks, but in how often his attention returns to her, like he is recalibrating something he no longer fully controls. "We are leaving soon," he says quietly as they move toward a quieter section of the room. Claire nods, but her eyes drift across the crowd, catching fragments of conversations, subtle shifts in posture, the kind of silent communication that happens in rooms where power is currency. "They are watching more than before," she says. Adrian does not deny it. "They are waiting," he replies. "For what?" Claire asks, though she already feels the answer. Adrian's expression tightens just slightly. "For a mistake." The words settle between them, heavy, but not unexpected. Claire exhales slowly, her shoulders straightening, not defensively, but with intention. "Then we do not give them one," she says. Adrian looks at her, and something in his gaze changes again, not surprise, not approval. Something closer to recognition, like he is seeing a version of her he had not fully accounted for. "It is not always that simple," he says quietly. Claire meets his eyes. "It is if we decide it is." Before he can respond, a voice cuts through the space behind them, smooth, controlled, and timed too perfectly to be coincidence. "Adrian, there you are." A man approaches, mid-50s, composed with the kind of confidence that comes from long-standing authority, not inherited, but built. His gaze flicks briefly to Claire, then back to Adrian. "I was beginning to think you were avoiding certain conversations tonight." Adrian's posture shifts, almost imperceptibly sharper, more guarded. "I do not avoid anything, Richard," he replies evenly. The man's smile is polite, but carries weight. "Good, then perhaps you can clarify something for me and the rest of the board." The air tightens around them, not visibly, not dramatically, but enough. Claire feels it, the shift from social event to something else, something strategic. "Your sudden marriage," Richard continues, his tone measured. "It raises questions about your decision-making at a time when stability is essential." Claire does not move, does not speak, but she listens closely, because this is no longer just about appearances. This is about control. Adrian's gaze remains steady. "My personal life does not impact my ability to lead." Richard tilts his head slightly. "It does when it affects perception, and right now perception is everything." A pause stretches, and in that moment Claire understands exactly what Vanessa meant. This is the test, not whispered, not hidden, but placed directly in front of them for everyone to see. Adrian could deflect, could redirect, could fall back into the controlled distance he has always relied on. But before he speaks, Claire does something unexpected. She steps forward, just enough to shift the dynamic without breaking it. Perception only becomes a problem when people believe they have more information than they actually do. she says, her voice calm, but clear, the words precise without being aggressive. Richard turns his attention to her fully, now assessing, measuring. And what information do you believe they are missing? He asks. Claire does not hesitate. That this is not a distraction, she says. It is a decision, and a decision made with clarity is not instability. It is direction. The silence that follows is brief, but significant because no one expected her to speak, and certainly not like that. Adrian looks at her, and for a moment something in his expression shifts completely, not controlled, not calculated, something real, something he did not plan for. Richard studies her for a second longer, then lets out a small breath, almost impressed. Well, he says slowly. That is one way to frame it. He nods once to Adrian, then steps back, the conversation, not won, but not lost either. As he disappears into the crowd, the tension does not vanish, but it changes shape. Adrian turns to Claire, his voice lower, now more personal than before. You were not supposed to do that. Claire meets his gaze steadily. I know. A beat passes, and then something unexpected happens. Adrian exhales quietly, the tension in his shoulders easing just slightly. And yet you did, he says. Claire gives the smallest hint of a smile. You said not to make mistakes. Adrian studies her for a long moment, and then something in him shifts again, deeper this time, more permanent, because standing there in the middle of a room, full of people waiting for him to fail, he realizes something he has not allowed himself to consider before. This is no longer just a contract, and Claire is no longer just part of the solution. She is becoming something else, something he cannot easily define, and for the first time that thought does not feel like a risk. It feels like something he might not want to lose. The drive back is quieter than the one before, not because there is nothing to say, but because there is too much, and neither of them has decided which part matters enough to speak. Claire sits beside Adrian again, her reflection faint against the darkened window, the city lights passing slower, now, like the night itself, is stretching out the moment, giving them more time than they expected. Adrian's hands rest loosely in his lap. No phone, no messages, no distractions for once, and that alone feels like something has shifted. You changed the outcome tonight, he says finally, his voice calm, but no longer distant. Claire turns her head slightly, looking at him, not fully, just enough. So did you? She replies. Adrian lets out a quiet breath, almost a soft laugh, but not quite. I was going to handle it differently, he admits. Claire studies him for a second. Would it have worked? Adrian pauses, considering the question in a way he usually does not allow himself to. Yes, he says, but it would not have been honest. Claire looks forward again, the faintest smile touching her lips. Then maybe this worked better. The car slows as they reach the building, the same one that felt overwhelming just hours ago, now standing in front of her, like something less intimidating, less distant. The driver opens the door, but neither of them moves right away. Claire, Adrian says her name differently. This time not as part of a role, not as something attached to a contract, but as if it belongs in the moment itself. She turns fully, now meeting his eyes. This was not supposed to become. He starts, then stops, searching for the right words, something precise, something controlled, but it does not come. Claire tilts her head slightly. Complicated. She offers. Adrian nods once, but there is no frustration in it, no resistance. Yes, he says quietly, and yet it did. A silence settles between them. But it is not the same silence as before. It is not careful or measured. It is open, uncertain, in a way that feels more real than anything else that has happened between them. Claire looks down briefly at her hand, the same hand that signed the contract just hours ago, the ink long dry, but the decision still unfolding. We agreed on something simple, she says softly. No expectations, no emotions, no questions. Adrian watches her closely. And do you want to keep it that way? He asks. The question lands differently, because this time it is not part of a negotiation. It is not about control or outcome. It is about choice. Claire lifts her gaze back to his, and for a moment, she does not answer, not because she does not know, but because she does. I do not know if it can stay that simple anymore, she admits. Adrian holds her eyes, and something in his expression shifts completely. The control, the calculation, the distance, all of it fading just enough to reveal something underneath, something honest. Neither do I, he says. The driver clears his throat softly from the front, reminding them they are still sitting in a car, still paused between where they were and where they are going. Claire reaches for the door handle, but hesitates for just a second. You said this ends in a year, she says. Adrian nods once. That was the agreement. Claire looks at him one last time before stepping out. Then maybe we should stop pretending we know how it ends, she says quietly. Adrian watches her as she steps out into the night, the door closing softly behind her. And for the first time in a long time, he does not think about the board or the company or the outcome. He only thinks about one thing: the question she asked him when they first met, and the answer he never really gave, because now he understands something. He was lost not in the way he thought, but in a way he never noticed until she said it out loud. And as he steps out of the car, following her into a life that no longer feels entirely controlled, Adrian realizes something else. This was never just a contract, it was a beginning, and for the first time, he is not trying to predict what comes next, he is willing to find out.